the Moor.
The Moor.
The Moor. And that actually is directly related to two slave trades. I imagine it's how he gets to Cambridge. One is right after the Pequot War, the war in which the Puritans defeat the Indians of southern Connecticut. There's a Pequot slave trade into the West Indies. The captive Pequot are actually sold into the West Indies. That ship actually returns with enslaved Africans. And it's right after that moment that the Moor appears on campus and becomes part of the sort of legend of early Harvard.
Toward the end of the book, you include a photograph that shows 5 men who served as president of Harvard University from 1829 to 1862. Talk about their significance and relation to slavery.
What I wanted to show in that final chapter, that final epilogue, was the ways in which slavery, even after the end of slavery in the Northeast, even after the northern colonies and northern states had actually moved toward emancipation and finished their emancipation processes, they continued to have economic ties to the South and the West Indies. And so one of the ways you can trace that is just by looking at who became the president of these universities, who the presidents were. And the presidents were virtually always the sons or the sons-in-law of merchant traders, people who were West India suppliers. And so after the slave trade ends and after slavery ends in the northern states, one of the businesses that continues is supplying the South and the West Indies with everything, all the provisions that they needed to run the plantations.
So I want to look at this picture again. You've got Quincy, you've got Everett, you've got, what is it, Sparks?
Yeah, Sparks.
Mather.
Jared Sparks.
And Felton. Explain. For example, Mather. In fact, at Harvard University, there is a house named after Mather.
The Mathers actually go back a long way, and so and they actually are part of the colonial story of slavery too. Increase Mather, of the second generation, is actually a president of Harvard, and he uses his slave, which was a person given to him by his parish. He uses his slave to actually run the business of the college in the colonial period. The slave runs errands between the various trustees, and he writes in his diary that he sent his Negro to do various bits of work for the college. And if you think about, Edward Everett, Jared Sparks, one of the ways that that they had managed to achieve the kind of influence that they did, Sparks, for instance, becomes rather famous actually for his writings about early American history. He becomes something of a really quite polished American historian, but that was actually a way of also creating ties with the South, intellectual relationships with the South. And so his writings as a historian also allowed him to create intellectual connections to these very important regions